Hey there, my name is Nick Post, and today I'm here with Austin, and we're talking about transparency. Austin, maybe you can introduce yourself.
Yeah, like I said, my name's Austin. I'm also a product designer here at GitLab. We both work under the same stage and manage just with different groups. And I just want to share a little bit of my perspective, come from a different type of working environment, coming into GitLab while I was still semi-fresh in my mind. I'm about a half year in now.
Cool. So a half year in, and obviously GitLab have a number of values, and we're talking about transparency today. But so what has been striking, or what's been noticeable for you transitioning into the type of transparency that GitLab has?
It's a combination of a few factors. The first thing that really struck me was just like the amount of design effort going towards a single product. That was something I was not used to. I would say in the past, it was usually one designer to one product just for the enterprise apps that I was designing for. And in some sense, there was like a greater accountability for the product now because there are so many more eyes on it and so many more opinions. Whereas before, it was just kind of like my opinion and then the front end development team, and that was about it. So things like maybe how do we structure the navigation? We have to get a lot more people to agree on the direction for that, as opposed to what I was used to before. I'm like, no, let's just like change it because I have an opinion and I just want to change things. So getting used to not necessarily getting like handshakes from everybody that for approval, but rather looking to show the direction and then helping advocate for why that direction makes sense was definitely a different experience for sure. Have you experienced anything similar in that regard?
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. The fact that we are um, working on things which potentially touch lots of different teams and stage groups means that the amount of transparency that we have around what features we build, what tweaks we make, all that sort of stuff is really vital. And by being transparent, it means that people become aware of the changes that we want to make because everyone can contribute. But in order to sort of work in that environment, we need to find a level of alignment when it comes to building these features. I think you brought a really interesting point up in that while we don't need to find consensus, it's definitely within our interest to be advocating and selling the point of view or perspective that you have to other people and communicating that as transparently as possible, also in a way which is asynchronous as well. So whether it comes to sort of talking about your direction, recording videos, writing comments, posting in the Slack, I've definitely noticed that there's an art to the design of things, but then there's an art to like selling the design as well, or framing your design in such a way where you can package it up in a consumable way, which people can provide feedback on and sort of align around.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree 100%. And something that I've had to become more comfortable with is showing that thought process earlier and more frequently, either through, like you said, working in GitLab, or it even could be designs in Figma. I was used to having my design files live in Sketch, my thoughts living in my personal notebook, my slide decks living on my computer. And when I was ready to present those information, that thought pattern, I could spend more time refining it, making it look better in order to sell the idea better. But instead here, since we're so focused on being transparent, like at any point, someone could go see what I'm working on in Figma and question it. And it's happened. Like I've gotten comments like, hey, what are you doing here? I'm doing something similar in settings and I'm trying to figure out this pattern. Or I've seen like our director come in and provide some thought on like the flow of a user's journey. And that's not something that I was used to in the past. And it's kind of like, oh, I wasn't ready to share my idea yet. But ultimately, it's like trying to surrender some of that pride to know that everybody means well and we're trying to reach the best product together.
The term I've heard for that experience that you mentioned within our handbook is called like having a low level of shame. So basically, getting things out there with a moderately low level of fidelity. So because some feedback is better than no feedback, and you're not getting any feedback whatsoever if it's stored away somewhere on your local computer.
Yeah, with that, I've learned while you're being transparent, you have to be pretty intentional about how you ask for feedback. Because like, just posting a design, it's not sufficient. Like you have to really ask more valuable questions from your other design partners or from your development team to get that thoughtful perspective. Otherwise, you're just keep like creating this like ocean of feedback that can become like insurmountable. You might just get too many thoughts on this flow, the visual hierarchy, the information architecture, the tech writing, when really you're like, hey, I just wanted to know, like, should this be on this page at all?
So do you have any like tips or structures or way of presenting your designs in order to get that targeted feedback that you're looking for?
Oh man. One of the things that I've tried to do more of is short recordings of what I am thinking. So like recording myself through an app called Loom or using Zoom and just recording a session with myself to talk through an idea and then put a specific question to it, because it's sometimes too difficult to like animate an entire flow in Figma and expect someone to go through that and know what you're thinking, or issues become really long and lengthy. And so just like quickly synthesizing it down to like a 1 or 2 minute video, just a quick grab. That's probably been the most efficient way to communicate, other than like creating some simple bullet points, asking very direct questions, and making it very obvious that like, hey, I'm not looking for opinions on should this color be red primary or red secondary. I'm looking for like, does this flow work? Should I consider alternative options? What about you? Have you found anything that works well for you?
Yeah, I agree. Having posting your thoughts and your direction in like a multimodal format, I think is really useful. So as you say, talking about what you're doing in a little 5-minute video, maybe summarizing the context of what you're trying to achieve overall with the problem, what you're trying to achieve overall with this particular design, and the sort of feedback you're looking for helps to set the stage so people can provide the feedback, which is as useful as possible. So that's like really, I'd say, like being a good host when it comes to sharing your content. You can think about providing an environment where people are responding to the things you want them to respond to, using the same sort of language and focusing on the sort of areas that are important to you at that time. They can respond outside of it, but providing that mapping of where you're looking for feedback is generally great. And then they can add additional things on top of it if needs be.
Yeah, 100%. Something else that was definitely a welcome change was the amount of like learning that is demonstrated by the team, and then the response being that it's celebrated openly. That's been very encouraging. So we have monthly showcases of like what different stages and groups are working on, which is like something I love to see. It is maybe that time that designers maybe get to work on some of their storytelling, and it's cool to see people just like throw up an issue and talk about it, or throw up a blog post that they wrote about and talk through that. But even still, like I see senior and staff level designers like asking questions in our UX co-working channel. And where I would come from in the past is like, you couldn't like ask questions the more senior you were. You were supposed to be the one like giving me opinions, and to see people like humble themselves and show like, I am also learning and looking for feedback too, even though I'm a staff or a senior or whatever it might be. That just kind of helps reinforce that like we're continuously learning here, and we celebrate all the learnings along the way, even the failures. Like we've had some cool presentations and demonstrations of ideas that weren't great, and talked about how they're going to try and refine them in the future, even if they haven't been accomplished yet.
Yeah, that's a great point. That's a really great point. So it's not just sort of transparency of the content that you're working on, but it's also transparency of outcomes as well, it seems.
Yeah, it was like where I came from, everything was celebrated to the point of like, did you hit your KPIs? What metrics did you hit? Did you get Did you reduce time on task? There wasn't a whole lot of room to say, this feature really sucked.
Hmm.
And we see that in our user base, and this is how we're going to make it better. And this is why we like that change. Or even just like I was saying, like senior leaders showing that they too are seeking feedback. You never heard those people looking for feedback. You only saw like the junior designers asking for feedback. So just that demonstration of I will be transparent in my process is, I think, really encouraging and helpful to learn from.
Okay,
For sure.
so if we take a look at like your previous organization, and
Yeah.
the model there was more junior designers. They listen to the feedback of the senior designers. The senior designers can provide like direction and all this sort of stuff. Um, in a new sort of more transparent environment, what's the relationship between designers at different levels then?
Mm. Um, I don't know if I can give an exact like tier of how the relationships look, but I can pull an example that I thought was a really great way to be transparent through collaboration. Pedro, one of our staff designers, he pulled together one of our most popular features in GitLab, the merge request page. And he articulated all the different states visually and then created this asynchronous issue to collect feedback from all designers, not just from the other staff designers, not the other senior product designers, not just the VP and directors, yes, everybody for feedback. And as someone that was new to GitLab at the time, what was very helpful for me was I learned more about merge requests. I saw all the different states that it could be in order for a team to try and get their changes submitted. So I learned a number of things. I learned like the architecture of the page. I learned different edge cases. And then I also learned what other designers were critiquing on the page, because it was just an open form of like, hey, we need to make this better. They're hold nothing back. Let's all talk about it. And it's super interesting to see the different perspectives of people that have been here a long time, the ones that were newer, and just getting to see that collaboration was really, really helpful as someone that was just joining GitLab at the time.
Yeah, that's definitely a great point to bring up. I think Pedro did a great job in experimenting with the format, as well as presenting and being such a good host for collecting that feedback as well.
Yeah.
And what I noticed with that exercise is how different everyone else thought about merge requests compared to me. Like
Mm-hmm.
I'm very interested in a lot more of the user flows and the systems and how merge requests map to different analytics things and objects, and getting the particular types of feedback and the broad array of different types of feedback from not just designers, but our developers and users and all this sort of stuff was
Right.
just was so great to see. And it just opened my eyes to the all the talent that we have here and all the different ways of thinking.
Right. I think that's just one of the great demonstrations of how transparency really helps make GitLab a better product.
Mm.
I would imagine like my previous teams, that would not have been as celebrated or even probably represented in terms of a mechanism for collecting feedback. One, because it might be too challenging. We worked on such different products that it's sometimes hard to really understand the context. Since we all work in GitLab, it kind of helps that we have some awareness of the rest of the product.
Mm.
Merge request being one of the more popular ones. But still, like, going out and soliciting that feedback and then also taking action on it and showing how it's making progress. I mean, it's the exact example of being transparent in the workplace and helping others grow at the same time as we're progressing the product.
Definitely. And I think this also sort of alludes to another type of transparency, which I was very new to when joining GitLab. So I had user research sessions, user testing sessions in previous jobs. However, I've never really designed transparently in issues just which can be viewed by users at any time, viewed
Yeah.
or commented on at any time as well. So it's like almost like you're designing with an audience, which has its challenges, but also has this tremendous number of opportunities as well. I was wondering whether you've noticed anything around that.
I mean, I had a funny instance happen last week. Um, we have noticed that in some of my group, some of our customers are responsible for like taking screenshots of their settings and time stamping them. And I was thinking, yeah, it's, a feature that I experience in my day-to-day life that is similar to this is using Time Machine on my laptop, where I can like go back to specific snapshots of my laptop and it's just like jumping back in time. It's like, man, that'd be really cool if we had that in GitLab. So I was just opening an issue and I hadn't put any ideas in it. I just said like, make a time machine for GitLab. And within like 5 minutes, someone had commented like, please make one for the rest of us too. It was great. I mean, I never thought I would ever see that issue ever. I mean, I was like working on it. So I was just like trying to document my thoughts as I was going. But I got a good laugh out of just a community person just throwing a comment on there. And I'm sure they're getting notifications now every time that I add designs to it, change the title. I took off Time Machine off the title. I didn't want it to be there.
That's hilarious.
But yeah, I mean, I think it's been cool to be able to see community contributions for sure and get to champion those ideas. I think that's been very fun to not only be a part of the GitLab team, but also celebrate the people and the greater GitLab community that want to make the product good as well.
And I suppose that's where like our value of transparency came from originally, was our open source history and the requirement for transparency in order to make open source happen. So I think, yeah, having the community around it is just is so valuable. And you can see even with situations like yours where people are sort of just joking a little bit, there's a huge opportunity for like serendipity of people just stumbling across things, adding their thing, and just seeing what emerges out the back of it.
Yep. Yeah, I think an unintended aspect of transparency is even in our hiring process. When I was going through it, I was able to go into the backlog of the team that I was interviewing for and see the problems that they were working on and talk about those problems in my interview. So often when I had interviewed other companies, you have a very vague understanding. You kind of like get pitched the problem space of the product, maybe a little bit of like the specific features or areas you work on, but it's really hard to understand what that means when you can't like see it. You can't like test the product. And so it was really insightful for me to be like, okay, these are the problems I work on day to day. I can even like try and make myself work in this way. So I tried to find an idea, come up with a design for it, look through all the discussions, be very confused by epics and issues and how things are structured, and get an understanding of what is it like to work at GitLab. It was like a great litmus test for like, do I even want to work here?
Yeah, that's true, because the way that information is structured within GitLab, the way that we work and so on, transparent for everyone to see, but the content that you talked about and having a detailed understanding of what is the problem space, I think that's a really good point that you bring up. So top tip for anyone who's looking to join GitLab, take a look at your group and what they're working on and see whether you can get anything interesting from there, understand what's going on, or potentially even contribute yourself. That would be great. So one more question from me, Austin.
All right.
As a new person joining GitLab, being onboarded, what would be your number one piece of advice for that designer around transparency and how transparency works at GitLab?
Just show everything that you can. Like if you ever in a file, make sure it's open. The worst is when someone says like, I can't see this link. So always make sure your Figma files, your Google Docs, your mural boards, your whimsical pages, your GitLab issues, unless it should be confidential. There are those unique circumstances where maybe we talk about customer information and you don't want to expose that, but always have things default to open. And then think about how you can expose more of your workflow into a transparent way. So if you're used to doing things by keeping a certain list on your phone, consider trying to find a way to use GitLab to do that. Find ways to expose the ways that you're working because someone else might find that useful.
That's a great piece of advice. Challenge your assumptions within your workflow and see how you can make them more transparent. Sometimes they may not work, but it's at least worthwhile trying to experiment at least.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Cool.
Exactly.
Austin, really appreciate your time. Thank you very much. Have a
Yeah.
good day. Ciao, ciao.